Welcome to the 816th meeting of Council. We will start with an opening prayer. God, grant that we who would seek to serve you may have the wisdom of your Spirit, the guiding of your hand, and the grace to serve together for the prosperity of our city. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand for the National Anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is girt by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty.
Rich and rare.
Any apologies, but we do have Mayor Tate, who's zooming in, simply in an abundance of caution because he's just come off an aircraft, and so to protect us all from any possibility, he's zooming in this morning. Good morning, Mr Mayor.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and good morning, all councillors. It's wonderful to be home, and it's a different experience zooming in. Now I understand the frustration what Councillor Castro may have had.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. You just chip in whenever you want, but I want the councillors to know that under Part 5, Clause 51A of the Act, the Mayor will remain seated today so that there's no confusion. We don't miss his head at any time when he wishes to speak, so that's fine. We'll move now, councillors, to condolences, and I would like to start the meeting with a very, very sad condolence, which I will present myself, and it's in regard to the passing in the early hours of this morning of our beloved Daphne Perry. If I could have a seconder, Councillor Owen Jones. Daphne passed away this morning in the Gold Coast Private Hospital after a short illness. She was born Daphne Welsh on the 12th of December 1931 and was one of 8 children, 6 boys and 2 girls. Excuse me. Daphne came to love sport at an early age, often crediting her father for her devotion to sport. She held many positions throughout her life: President of the Queensland Rugby League, a member of the Queensland Olympic Council, and Director of Gold Coast Events Management. In her younger years, she was also a champion sprinter, and in 1955 she held no less than 40 Open Championships in her state and was unbeaten in all events. Daphne was an enthusiastic supporter of anything that encouraged greater sporting participation by the city's young people and the building of world-leading sporting infrastructure. She also loved hockey, excuse me, and all sports, leading her to become the president of the Gold Coast Sporting Hall of Fame from 1999 until her passing this morning. She is survived by her 2 children, Robert and David. Vale Daphne Perry, a true icon of Gold Coast sport. Friday, 1st of April 2021. And I'm sure, councillors, that we all feel similarly right at this moment. Daphne was one of our most beautiful women, and she made us so proud so many times in her representation and her love of this city. And I guess we all really fondly recall the lead up to the Commonwealth Games when Daphne had a finger in many pies and always so proudly representing this city, and we loved her dearly. So I'll take the vote. Mr Mayor, would you like to say anything at this point before I take the vote?
I concur with your comment, and there's one thing that Daphne left us all is the wonderful sporting spirit, the wonderful leadership shown in our city, and the love she had for the sporting community, and each events that we go to, she was one of the bright stars at all times, and I will miss her dearly.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We'll take the vote. All in favour? That, of course, is unanimous, and I would imagine we all would like to be signatories to the card. So thank you, councillors. I'll now go to Councillor Vorster, who would like to offer a condolence for Mr Rob Reddings.
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Chair. I'd like to move that a motion of condolence be passed and a message of sympathy be forwarded to the Reddings family on the passing of Rob Reddings.
Seconded, Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just want to rise briefly because this is a very sad story with which I'm sure we're all familiar. But Rob sadly passed at the age of 79, and many of us would know that he was the first presenter for 9 Gold Coast News here on the Gold Coast. And I'm not claiming there's any bias in Nine's reporting, but I was just reading that there was a suggestion at some point that he was even more famous than Sir Bruce Small because of the warm way in which he engaged with audiences right across the Gold Coast. He will be sorely missed, I know, by the members of the media fraternity, but even more by his family, who provided him with the utmost compassionate care towards the end of his life. Another Gold Coast icon, and yeah, I think it's worth noting his contribution to the Gold Coast and the trust that so many households placed in him to tell important Gold Coast stories. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Vorster. We'll take the vote. All in favour? That is carried. Certainly. So we'll include Councillor Owen-Jones, Councillor Caldwell, Councillor Lacastre, Councillor Young, Councillor McDonald and Councillor O'Neill, Councillor Taylor and myself, if you don't mind, because these condolences will go out in the name of the Mayor, so I would like to be included, please. We'll now go to Councillor Lacastre.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Look, I've actually got 2 messages of condolence today. The first one is for the Montgomery family, of Arundel, on the passing of William Fraser Montgomery, who passed away on the 23rd of March.
Can I have a seconder, please? 2022. Councillor Baildon Lumsden.
Sorry, yeah. Look, William was an avid volunteer, and many organisations, and particularly with JCs and Rotary, where he was actually twice awarded the Paul Harris Fellow. He was a resident of Paradise Point in Labrador for the last 15 years. William will be sadly missed by his wife Sally, his children David, Andrea, Mark. He's got 7 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren. The reason I'm actually moving this is William's son, of course, is David. I've mentioned David as in our David Montgomery, who was here for 24 and a half years as inaugural city solicitor. I got a call from David last week who asked me if I'd actually move this on behalf of the family. So, yeah, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. All in favour? That is carried. Councillor McDonald, anyone else? Councillor Caldwell, Councillor Owen-Jones, Councillor Vorster, and myself, if that's okay, please.
And obviously, yeah.
Go again, Councillor Lacastre.
Another message of condolence for the Bingham family on the passing of Declan Bingham. This condolence is particularly sad. I mean, obviously all condolences are very sad, but Declan was only in his mid-20s and he had a lot ahead of him in his life. He was a very gifted footballer, as in a soccer player. He tragically passed away in the USA. He'd been based there for about the last almost 7 years. And he was actually there because he'd taken up a sports scholarship at a university. Declan was a really fine young man. He played a lot of football here on the Gold Coast in his junior years. He played for many, many years with Magic United through the juniors, then went on to represent the senior team. And his family, of course, have a very strong history of football here on the Gold Coast, a very strong and very praiseworthy history. His father of Troy was a former board member of Football Gold Coast. He was also the CEO of the reformed Gold Coast United, so he came in to take them over on their second emergence. And of course, he also started up the Bond University Junior Soccer Club. So he's now running the Erie Sports Centre in Pennsylvania, and he's just literally set up a scholarship fund in Declan's name and his son's name to help kids through playing sports. So following the game, immediately following Declan's death, Magic United, the teams all wore armbands, and the Brisbane Roar actually all wore armbands. Such was the respect for a really lovely young man. Very, very sad. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lecastro. That was seconded by Councillor Tozer. And all in favour, please. That is carried. And Councillor Owen-Jones, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Worcester, and myself, if you wouldn't mind, please. Thanks, councillors. No more condolences from anyone. We'll move on. There's no mayoral minute, Mr Mayor.
Sorry, Madam Chair, you might have seen on screen there is one more condolence for Glenn Goodman. I intend to move.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Worcester. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Chair. I'd move that a motion of condolence be passed and that a message of sympathy be forwarded to the Goodman family on the passing of Glenn Goodman.
Seconder, Councillor Pauline Young.
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Chair. I'm sure, Madam Acting Chair, you, along with all of our other colleagues, would be familiar with those quiet residents who work very constructively with us to improve the amenity in very small and specific neighbourhoods, people who are very constructive, engaging and just want their slice of the Gold Coast looked after. Glenn Goodman was one such local, a true Robina icon and champion, who was very possessive over Hampton Park, Pinnacle Court and a section of Manly Drive, and took every opportunity to draw my attention to the things that needed fixing to ensure that the promise of Robina as a living paradise, as the marketing brochure put, was lived out in reality. Because of Glenn's advocacy, we replenished lakeside beaches, we cleared islands, returned them back to the public where they'd been once occupied by bats and self-sown pest vegetation. Glenn was passionate about making sure his part of the Gold Coast shined, and on his recent passing, I had an opportunity to speak with members of the Robina State School PNC, former representatives, who shone a light on Glenn's work with that school. And it was just amazing and has left a legacy. And we've had big icons recognised today, but sometimes it's the little guy that has big impact too. And I just think it's fitting to recognise Glenn's contribution to this part of Robina today.
Thank you, Councillor Worcester. All in favour? That is carried. Thanks, councillors. There's no mayoral minute. We'll move on to confirmation of minutes. Were there any corrections, councillors? If not, Councillor Tozer would like to move the acceptance of the minutes. A seconder? Councillor Peter Young, thank you. All in favour? That is carried. So we don't need to adopt them now. They've been received and adopted in the one because no one had any corrections, so that is done. The Mayor's report, I've taken a decision, given this is an unusual situation and we have the Mayor in attendance, I've taken a decision to simply list the activities that have been undertaken here in the city in the Mayor's absence. When the Mayor's back chairing the next council meeting, he'll give all councillors a presentation of the work that he's been doing in the UK during his most recent trip. So I would simply like to move that the list of recent activities be recorded in the 816th minute. Seconded, Councillor Vorster. All in favour, and you can have a read of those at your leisure. That's done.
Yeah.
Okay, there's no clarifications, Mr CEO, no business arising, and no presentations. Councillors, do we have any forward conflict of interest declarations? No? So we'll move on to reception and consideration of committee minutes, and I'll go straight to you, Councillor Vorster.
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Chair. Madam Acting Chair, I move that the report of the Lifestyle and Community Committee meeting held on Tuesday the 22nd of March 2022, covered by recommendations 1 through 8, be received.
Seconded, Councillor Bailden-Lumsden. All in favour? Carried. Are there any issues, councillors? No issues. Back to you, Councillor Vorster.
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Chair. I move that, I move that the recommendations of the Lifestyle and Community Committee be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you. All in favour?
Well done.
That is carried. This is how you do it, Tom. Okay. Sorry, that was a joke.
We can check on the tape.
We had a seconder from Councillor Bailden-Lumsden. Thank you. See, I have slipped up, Tom. Okay, moving on to Councillor Pauline Young for Transport and Infrastructure.
Madam Acting Chair, I move that the report of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee meeting held on Tuesday the 22nd of March 2022, covered by recommendations 1 to 7, be received.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Taylor. All in favour? That is carried. Any items, councillors?
No one wants to be that guy.
Okay, back to you, Councillor Young.
Madam Acting Chair, I move that the recommendations of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee be adopted.
Thank you. All in favour? Oh, did I get a seconder?
Peter.
Thank you. Councillor Young. I better get back on the game. Okay. I'm sure this one won't be quite so simple. Over to you, Councillor Caldwell.
Thanks, Acting Mayor.
Acting Chair.
Sorry. I move that the report of the Planning and Environment Committee meeting held on Thursday, 24 March 2022, covered by recommendations 1 to 10, be received.
Seconded, Councillor Young. Peter Young. Councillor Peter Young. All in favour? That is carried. And I ask with bated breath, any issues, councillors? Councillor Vorster.
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Chair. Just on 6.2, I just want to draw my colleagues...
Oh, I have a declaration on 6.2,
Okay, great.
if I may.
Yeah, well,
before you.
mine's
you have one too?
declaration related as well.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Chair. Madam Acting Chair, I just want to draw the meeting's attention to 3 issues that I ventilated at committee, that being I have a friend who owns an investment unit in the vast swathe of the city mapped in the report. I have a friend, an electoral donor, who owns a property, also again in the large swathe of the local government area captured in the report. And we also have some friends who own a development site that may be affected by eventual outcomes connected with this report. And that development site, by the way, was subject to a formal DCI that I made a couple of rounds ago, for which Council graciously allowed me to participate fully in that decision. Prior to the planning meeting, I did seek some advice from the City Solicitor and was told I could rely on the fact that these matters would qualify for an exemption in that they affected a great number of people in the local government area and did not give rise to any specific benefit to these parties. I didn't make a declaration at committee on the strength of that advice, but wanted to formally raise that again here at Council in case those who didn't attend the meeting wish to raise any concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Vorster. Does anyone have any concern? We didn't have a concern at committee, so we'll thank you for providing that information to the council. I did make a declaration at committee which is on the screen, and it related to the same item, the neighbourhood framework engagement, and it was due to receipt of donations from Place Design, who were the council appointed consultants to the project, and the amounts received are on the screen, and I'm seeking permission of council to remain in the room for the decision today. So
Madam Chair, I'm happy to move, as I did at committee, that you participate in the decision despite your conflict of interest. Because the reasons given by Councillor Gates demonstrate that your contribution to the matter outweighs any perceived conflict of interest that may exist.
thank you, councillor. That's seconded by Councillor Peter Young, and we need to call a division. Thanks, Mr McCabe.
In favour?
All in favour?
Councillor Tate, Councillor Hamill, Councillor Owen Jones, Councillor Caldwell, Councillor Peter Young, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Bart-Lumsden, Councillor Castro, Councillor Tozer, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Vorster, Councillor Pauline Young, Councillor McDonald and Councillor O'Neill.
And of course I didn't vote. Thank you, councillors. Any items, Councillor Hamill?
Do you want to just deal with that one first, Councillor Gates, item 6.2?
Oh, sure. Sure. Would you like to move that?
I'm happy to move the committee recommendation.
Okay. Seconded, Councillor Pauline Young. All in favour? That is carried. Any other items? Councillor Hamill.
Madam Acting Mayor, could we open up 6.6 for a change of recommendation, please?
Certainly. Would you like to have you provided it to the Minute
Secretary has. So, Madam Chair, just in consultation with the Director while the Minute Secretary brings that up, there's a late addition that the Director would like to make to one of the points. So if the Minute Secretary can bring it up, and I might throw to the Director just to make that late addition if she's still happy to.
If you would, thank you.
Through you, Madam Acting Chair, Councillor Hamill, just for the councillor's benefit, I just suggested to Councillor Hamill that particularly in relation to the Mayor writing to the state, it would be beneficial if we also included there some options for implementation, so that when we are writing to them, it's not only to seek the support to do the work, but also look at any potential options for implementing that. So as we go through the state's process, there might be other suggestions they have. So I can...
Thank you. So, Councillor Hamill, can you please speak to this and tell us what your changes are?
I can, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, would you mind just getting the proposed recommendation or proposed motion on the screen? Is that it?
Yeah.
So, Councillor Hamill, have you discussed this with Councillor Caldwell?
He's seen the change recommendation, not discussed in great detail, Madam Chair, but he's seen the proposed change.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, it is the committee recommendation just with the inclusion of the dates and stages that are listed in the report. So the report outlines the 4-stage process for this to work under in consultation with the Mayor's office and a couple other officers. I decided that I wanted to bring those dates into the recommendation to make sure that there's a clear timeline that we can provide to the state government and provide to industry in what's occurring. For the sake of a second, though, if there's any questions I can answer on it or any more detail I can provide councillors on what I'm proposing.
Happy to second it. Councillor Peter Young is happy to second that. Yep. So, did you want to speak further to it?
If there's questions, otherwise I'm happy to speak to it.
Okay. Any questions, councillors? No?
Right. So, Madam Chair, my reason for the change of recommendation is that in consultation with the Mayor's office that councillors may remember this item came about because of a mayoral minute, and that in that time, waiting for the report to come through, we've been able to gather more information on exactly where we're up to in terms of land supply in our industrial area and what's coming up in the pipeline. I understand most councillors don't understand the other enterprise area particularly well. It's the very, very northern tip of our city, and as always, I'd extend the opportunity for any councillor to come up for a drive around with me to get a better understanding. But for some quick figures, it's 3,300 hectares. So the one enterprise area is actually bigger than a couple of your entire divisions. In that division, there's several thousand businesses employing about 40,000 people. Out of that 3,300 hectares, we're down to our last 100 hectares of fragmented land in the area. So we have about 12 months worth of greenfield land left. This is a problem because based on the current information coming through in DAs and the current information coming through from industry, is that in the next 12 months, we can expect the best part of 500,000 square metres of GFA required for one developer alone. Concerningly, we have nowhere to put these buildings. These are big buildings. They're 40, 50, 80, 100,000 square metre buildings. They count their employee numbers in the thousands. Of great concern to me is that in a meeting yesterday I found out that 2 existing Gold Coast businesses that aren't in Yatala, they're actually in other parts of the city, are both looking at expanding in the next 18 months, and there is not a big enough block of land anywhere in the city for them to expand to. And as it currently stands, one of those companies will be moving to New South Wales because we do not have land available for them. The purpose of the change recommendation is to send a very clear signal to the state government and to set some timelines internally for the officers that there is an urgency to this now, that on the back of COVID and other circumstances, we need to move this along a little bit quicker than what the report intended. By bringing the timelines in, it means the city plan program can be updated. Officers then have a timeline to meet. The letter to the mayor, is going to write to the Premier, can have a little bit more detail in it on why it's urgent. And then the director and her manager of strategic planning can go with the job of delivering that land supply. So that's all I have, Madam Chair. I'm happy still if there's any other questions on it or concerns that I can talk to.
Thank you. Can I just ask, you've spoken, Councillor Hamill's spoken about bringing it forward, but my understanding was that we're just bringing what was already suggested into this recommendation.
Through you, Madam Acting Chair, I think Councillor Hamill's proposed recommendations does change what was in the council officer's report.
So, okay. Madam Chair, I've bought, in stage 1 and stage 2, it effectively takes 8 months out of the process.
Okay, and my question is, are you able to meet those timeframes without other projects that are on your books falling behind?
Through you, Madam Acting Chair, I have expressed concern to Councillor Hamill and Councillor Caldwell. It may be, so the thing for us is at the moment we haven't done the work to define the extent of the study area too, so we don't know how big this area is. If there's, for example, there might be flooding concerns. I think until we get into it, we're probably not going to know. So as long as it's, I guess, clear that we're not confident in these timeframes, I think the addition of having the implementation options with the state government would allow us to maybe reduce some of the state government timeframes. But no, I'm not 100% confident that we can do that at this stage.
Okay, fine. Councillor Young, you had a question?
Thank you, Chair. Acting Chair. I just wanted to be certain about the terminologies used. The paper presented to us was about the Yatala Stapleton industrial land, and the motion that was carried through committee made that reference, but this motion in front of us now talks about the Yatala enterprise area, so I just want to make sure there's no problem with that change in terminology, okay, if it's taken to the state government. Or
over to you, Alicia.
Through you, Madam Acting Chair, I probably prefer if we could go back to the wording in the report. I'm not sure why it has changed, Councillor Hamill. Yeah, I think if we can change it, because that was the original recommendation from the mayoral minute that we received last.
Thank you. So if we could correct the first line there. Oh, I'm not sure which recommendation we're looking at here. Joe, can you please correct Stapleton, S-T-A-P-L-E-T-O-N? Take the E out, sorry. Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Owen-Jones.
So we're writing to the Premier. Is it the Premier that we should be writing to, or is it the Deputy Premier? Who is the responsible minister that we would be asking for co-funding for?
Through you, Madam Acting Chair, it would be the Deputy Premier, Stephen Miles. So what we could do when we send that letter, we could do the CC to, and to be honest, we'd probably do it to EDQ as well if possible. But Premier would be the main.
So I only say that because I think we've all experienced where we've requested the Mayor to write and inevitably a couple of months later we get a reply back referring it to the appropriate minister, which kind of loses the time Councillor Hamill is trying to catch up in regards to the efforts. So I don't know whether or not we should just write directly to the responsible minister.
I'll go back to you, Councillor Hamill.
I had a question if you could, Madam Chair.
Sure.
Madam Chair, question for you to the CEO, just in the back of the Director's comments about her concerns and resourcing. Are you confident that based on this and through the budget process, you can work with the Director to address those resourcing issues so these timelines could, which are ambitious, but we could get closer to?
Through you, Acting Chair, I'm confident that we can make best efforts to hit those dates, but I'm also confident in the answer that my Director gave, which is that we've got a lot of work on, and that, you know, when you truncate dates, other things get affected. So I guess it's a matter for Council around the overall priority in my Director's area.
Thank you, councillors. I'm going to go over to you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, would you like to make a comment about the workload for us and the amendment package and what have you?
Yeah, the amendment package, as far as the council is concerned, it's been up to state interest check, and that is our priority piece of work. So what I would say to the CEO and our planning director is that whatever you do to accelerate this one, it's not to harm the progress of the piece of work that you've already done with the state. I wanted to make that clear so that we get an end result, that our planning comes back from the state.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Councillor Caldwell.
Just a question in relation to resourcing. The original report had a non-recurrent budget ask of $150,000, whereas this recommendation doesn't specify an amount. So does Councillor Hamill have an explanation for that change? I'm interested as to whether the amount's gone up or down or it's not known. Yeah.
Okay, well, Councillor Caldwell, we'll refer it to budget and...
Yeah, it's just that there's no amount in that one, whereas the previous recommendation from committee had $150,000. So are we expecting that there's a new amount or a different amount or a lesser or more?
I don't think we're expecting a new amount, so is it okay for us to include the recommendation in your motion, Councillor Hamill? It's your motion, so I need you to clarify whether you want that amount.
Madam Chair, so the original recommendation had 150 because it was only considering stage 1. And there was also part of the report where it spoke to the fact that things had already been commenced using internal resources. So I removed the 150 because on the back of this, there hasn't been a chance for the organisation to work out a dollar figure yet. So a dollar figure would be presented at budget, which on the basis of the advice I got through Joe, that was the wording that was suggested, that it still goes through budget process to be considered and that the amount will be considered at that time.
Okay. Councillor Owen-Jones.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Hamill, would you consider amending it to include the amount of 150? Because I think that would help. And would you consider amending it to direct the correspondence to the Deputy Premier of Queensland? Because I think that too would help. Because the two things are joined together. Like we've named the amount that we think that we need to do to at least start stage 1, and that's what we're effectively going to be asking for a co-contribution or more from the state of Queensland in regards to what it means for employment in the north of the city.
Madam Chair, just reflecting on that 0.5 doesn't really make sense without having a dollar figure in it, because what are we actually looking to match the funding for? So I'm happy to add the 150,000 back into 0.4.
Councillor Hamill, that's fine. I'm just concerned that when you approached me prior to bringing this change forward, it was simply to include the dates that were already within the report. And now we're looking, when I'm looking at the recommendation, it goes on to stage 2 and stage 3, and it sets timeframes that the councillors on the planning committee have not had the opportunity to interrogate. So, I mean, clearly I'm a big supporter of the expansion of the Yatala-Stapleton industrial area, and had in fact moved a very similar motion myself before your election. So I am, but we do need to be mindful of the workload, and it just concerns me that the $150,000 has now no relevance really because there's 2 extra stages of work included. So I need some guidance here about whether the motion before us is competent in suggesting that amount of funding for all that's now been included. Director, if you don't mind.
Through you, Madam Acting Chair, so the $150,000, you're correct, was for the original stage 1 and 2, so we would have to go back and have a look at that for the further stages. Also, I think it's important to note that it's not necessarily, we could put a lot of money at it, it's not necessarily a resourcing thing, it's the time it takes to do the investigation. So we could have 5 people working on it, but they would still need to do the same amount of work. So definitely that $150,000 would need to be reviewed. We could do that through the budget process and amend our budget papers.
Okay. All right. Well, it refers it to budget. So if there's no other... Councillor Caldwell.
I was just going to say, just on that point, I think in the first instance, the sensible thing is the letter to the Deputy Premier going to go prior to budget? So it may all become academic. If there's no buy-in from the state, then the spend on this project will be 0. If we get to the 30 June and we've got our budget and we've got the first 150 from us, we've got matched funding from the state, then the project commences, we can meaningfully progress it and then deal with any further budgetary implications throughout the year as we ordinarily would for ups and downs. So I think it's probably okay as it is, especially if we get the letter off quickly.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Caldwell. If there's no other questions, I'll go back to Councillor Hamill to close.
Madam Chair, actually, you raised a really relevant point in there that there's a fairly long history of resolutions on this matter, and it's part of the reason why I've had to make these recommendations today, in my opinion, is because that after nearly 6 years of resolutions saying that we needed to get on with the land supply analysis, we still haven't made a move on it. And in that 6 years, 380 hectares of greenfield land has been developed.
I just have to correct you, it's only 3 years.
Since the 2021, there's things back to 2016 on this, but that's fine. So, councillors, there is an urgency to this. There's an urgency for the entire city. This isn't about my area. The Yatala Enterprise area provides goods and services to every single division, every single area of this city. If we are in a position that if we don't get on with this work and set some ambition timeframes, I know they're ambitious, there's no doubt, but if we don't put some timeframes in to send a clear signal to the state, a clear signal to industry and a clear signal to our officers that we're serious about this, then our city will run out of suitable industrial land in the next 12 to 18 months, and billions of investment and tens of thousands of jobs will be at jeopardy. That is what it boils down to. 2 existing companies in Yatala that need 180,000 square metres in 12 months' time do not have a big enough block of land zoned in this city to move to. 2,500 jobs between the 2 companies. I do not want to be here in 12 months' time or 18 months' time saying goodbye to one of those businesses and those people seeing unemployment. It's ambitious, but it's doable. It needs the state government's input, and the Director and I absolutely acknowledge that we need the state government to really get on board with this, and this is really sending them a very, very strong signal that the city is serious about doing this, and hopefully they buy in, they give us the match funding, they give us the officer support, and they give us one of the instruments available to the Deputy Premier to help us cut some of the time frame out. But we have to start somewhere, and for me, it's this change recommendation with some clear timelines and hopefully the buy-in of everyone involved to see this through.
Thanks, Councillor Hamill. That is closed. We'll take the vote on Councillor Hamill's motion. All in favour?
Division.
Councillor Gates, Councillor Tate, Councillor Hamill, Councillor Owen-Jones, Councillor Caldwell, Councillor Petition, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Barr-Lumsden, Councillor Castro, Councillor Tozer, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Forster, Councillor Pauline-Young, Councillor McDonald-Land, Councillor O'Neill.
Councillor Tate.
Councillor Tate?
There is in favour.
Yes, I got
Got
Councillor
him?
Tate.
Great. Thank you.
Didn't see your hand.
That is carried.
United.
Any other items, councillors? Councillor Forster.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The supplementary item, which was the last item, so I'm just looking for my unconfirmed minutes. Here we go, 6.7. If we could deal with that separately. I just want to slightly tweak that officer recommendation.
Okay. Would you like to tell us about it? Councillor Forster, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd just like to tweak the committee recommendation, adding an additional part. So if we could just add this right to the start, so below seconded by Councillor Owen-Jones. I'd like to move a change recommendation, adding that Council reject the deemed approval asserted by the applicant. Full stop, and then leave the balance of the motion as is. And
Before I ask for a seconder, I think I'll go to the director and find out, was there a deemed approval asserted?
I'm happy to talk to it, Madam Chair.
Okay. Well...
I can answer your question because it's my words and I'm
Do I
familiar
have a
with
seconder then? Councillor Lacastra. Second. Right. Go ahead, Councillor Forster.
Thank you, Madam Acting Chair. This is an interesting development. It's a fascinating development because it's an example of, in my experience, an applicant working with myself as a community representative and working in good faith with city officers to arrive at an outcome that justifies a particular scale of development, one that delivers much needed housing close to public transport, but does it in a way that's sympathetic to the Riverwalk precinct. By and large, it ticks a lot of boxes. And I just want to thank Thomas, if he's tuning in, who's one of our new planning officers who worked on this report, for really giving it the intensity of assessment that this application deserved. Madam Acting Chair, one of the reasons why we took this matter to committee was that there is this understanding in the development sector that within the central parts of Robina, you can lodge a development application with council, and council has only 40 days, not 42 business days with a blackout period over Christmas, but 40 calendar days to assess a development application. Now, it doesn't matter if you're building a private hospital or an Olympic Games village or a boutique stadium, whatever it is, developers seem to be under the impression that they can lodge paperwork and 40 days later, if they haven't heard back from council, if council hasn't made a decision, guess what? They have an approval, not with conditions, but approval with 0 conditions. No conditions concerning car parking, no conditions concerning connection to our headworks, well, our trunk infrastructure. No conditions associated with their waste management. 0 conditions whatsoever. I couldn't think of a situation more perverse when we are charged with protecting the public interest. And when we look at the Local Government Act and the principles we have to adhere to, we're required to look after not only the residents of today, but the residents of the future. And if we're in a situation where we have development approved with 0 conditions, I don't know how we can actually discharge that duty at all. So there are some developers who believe that they have these rights to lodge applications just before Christmas and expect in 40 days they've got the green light to do whatever they want. It's a nonsense. It's not in the public interest, and I have to say that's not the way development should work. Development is inevitable, but I tell you what, it can be better curated and it can produce dividends for a community if it's done right and if the process is in good faith. Now, having worked with the applicant and having worked with city officers in good faith to arrive at a built form that ticked all of those boxes, we had a report at committee. And the purpose of committee considering the report was to assert the fact that we do not accept a 40-day deemed approval, but we will deal with matters as expediently as possible, which is one of our interpretations of the Acts Interpretations Act. Sorry for that tautology. Madam Acting Chair, 4 hours after committee unanimously approved this development, 4 hours, we get a letter from the applicant saying, oh, nice decision, committee, but guess what? We're exercising our right to a deemed approval with 0 conditions. How's that? For a council that's worked in good faith with an applicant to get an outcome that suits the committee, the community delivers housing at an affordable price point through a great process that's transparent and accountable to the public. 4 hours later, the applicant says to us, hey, guess what? We're going to set aside your decision and we're going to pursue our development with 0 conditions. Now, Madam Acting Chair, Council has consistently said that we do not buy into that interpretation. It would be a terrible outcome if we acceded to the view of the developer, and what we need to do today is we need to do what we're required to do, which is to assess this application as expediently as possible, and we're going to give them an approval. But we're going to give them an approval with conditions that protects the community interest. And we're going to make it very clear to the next applicant that we will not buy into a process that doesn't give the elected representatives of the city the opportunity to scrutinise development and create a transparent record in the public domain about why a development has been supported for approval. So, Madam Acting Chair, to close my introduction, I want to say that the applicant has sought approval for their development. They got that approval at committee, and today, if it's the will of the council, they will also get that approval. But what they will do in getting that approval is also take with them a collection of conditions that protect the community interest. And they will be subject to the same rigour, the same transparent process that any other applicant would expect to find themselves in any other part of the city. And we must draw a line in the sand, because we might see incredibly large-scale developments pushed by the state or some other developer in this precinct. And if we don't draw that line in the sand, we will have no say. And that's unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Owen-Jones.
It's a question, and I won't ask it for Councillor Castro to answer, but if I could ask it for the Director to answer. So at the committee, we received a supplementary agenda, which was a late item. The committee made a decision, as Councillor Vorster has pointed out. It's up to the council to affirm that decision today, so a decision isn't made until the council does that. Where do we sit in regards to the 40 calendar days? Did it happen between the committee and now, or do we still have days?
Through you, Madam Acting Chair, the decision date for this, I believe, is the 23rd of March 22. So the reason why it was a late agenda item was when it came in and we assessed it, we got it up as quick as we could. So we believe we're doing everything that we can to get that decision through. We are over that time, but we've done the best we can in that situation.
Just through the City Solicitor, what is the legal position, please, on this one?
Through you, Acting Chair, our position is, has been communicated to the applicant, that a deemed approval doesn't apply to this application, and that has been our consistent position for other applications where there has been a deemed approval asserted. So we're doing nothing different than we normally do.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Peter Young.
Thank you. My question was very similar to that. So the exclusion or the differentiation in this precinct is what, please? Through you,
Acting Chair. The difference here is that this particular application is lodged under the Robina legislation, which, as we know, has a completely different set of rules. One of the issues that we're constantly tested on, but as I said, we're confident on, is that a deemed approval process doesn't apply for an application in this area under the Robina legislation.
Councillor Baildon-Lumsden.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. Just had a quick question. Correct me if I'm wrong. Zone planning's one of the consultants on board. I thought I'd vaguely remembered someone's raised a conflict with Zone in the past. I may be wrong, but just wanted to air that.
No one that I know of.
Okay, no worries then, apologies.
Thank you.
That was good.
Thank you. Councillor Caldwell.
So just two things, Madam Chair. The first thing, I just wondered whether we shouldn't flesh out that highlighted paragraph there to say that council reject the deemed approval asserted by the applicant in the correspondence from their consultant zone planning dated 24 March, just to be a bit more specific. So if the mover wants to consider
Mover
that.
happy with that?
In the correspondence from the, consultant zone planning dated such and such, 24th of March, I believe it was. And then the second thing is just a typographical error, but the following paragraph, council approves an S rather than the D.
Thanks, Councillor Caldwell. Any other questions, councillors? If not, Councillor Castro, you wouldn't like to speak to that given the seconder? I would actually, yeah. Oh, please stand.
Just like to say, I taught Councillor Forster very well, and I'm very proud of him. Very proud of him.
Okay, all in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Are there any other items, councillors? If not, back to Councillor Caldwell.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I move that the remaining recommendations of the Planning and Environment Committee be adopted.
Seconder. Councillor Tozer. All in favour? That is carried. Thanks, councillors. Yeah. Oh, yes, I see that. Okay, Councillor O'Neill, Water and Waste.
Thank you, Acting Madam Chair.
A moment to swap seats.
Thank you, Madam Acting Chair. I move that the report of the Water, Waste and Energy Committee meeting held on Thursday, 24th of March 2022, covered by recommendations 1 to 7, be received.
Seconder, Councillor Hamill. All in favour? That is carried. Are there any items, councillors? No items. Back to Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Acting Madam Chair. I move that the recommendations of Water, Waste and Energy Committee 1 to 7 be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Young. All in favour? That too is carried. Thanks, councillors. Thanks, Director Heaton. Councillor Owen-Jones, Governance.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. I'm not too sure who may be the director, whether or not Paul is zooming in or not. It's Joe. Okay, thank you. I move the report of the Governance Administration Finance Committee meeting held on Wednesday the 30th of March 2022, covered by recommendations 1 to 10 be received.
And that's seconded by Councillor Patterson. All in favour? Carried. Any items, councillors? No items. Back to you, Councillor Owen-Jones.
Thank you. And Thank you, Kirk. I move the remaining recommendations of the Governance and I move all of the recommendations of the Governance Administration Finance Committee be adopted.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Caldwell. All in favour? That is carried. That takes us through to you, Councillor Lacastra, for Economy, Tourism and Events Committee.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yes, I move the report of the Economy, Tourism and Events Committee, which was held on Wednesday, the 30th of March 2022, covered by recommendations 1 to 4 be received.
Seconded, Councillor Tozer. All in favour? Councillors, are we voting? All in favour in receiving the report? Thank you.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That is carried. Any items, councillors?
For longer. Would you have to do a declaration?
Councillor Vorster.
Thank you. Just 6.1, Madam Chair. I just think it's important to read a particular paragraph. I suppose it's the public record.
Certainly.
Thanks, Madam Acting Chair. Just
Sorry, Councillor Tozer, did you have a conflict of interest declaration on this?
Madam Chair, my conflict is on item 7.2, not on this one.
Oh,
but
okay.
When you're ready to take a motion, I'm happy to move
sure.
to committee recommendation.
Sorry, Councillor Vorster.
thanks, Madam Acting Chair. Just on, happy to move it, obviously, and if there's a second, I just want to...
Councillor Tozer.
Thanks, Madam Acting Chair. Just on page 19, there's this real salient point for me, and it talks about mitigation of directorate risks, and it says here, a documented emerging risk exists within the Lifestyle and Community Directorate, being the Brisbane 2032 Olympic Games. The specific risk is a significant increase in the number of events that will be drawn to the Gold Coast as a result of being an Olympics co-host, pre and post Games. I just wanted to briefly talk to that, Madam Acting Chair, which is to say the Brisbane 2032 Olympic Games is not just sunshine and rainbows. There will be significant imposts on those who are involved in staging the events, whether it's infrastructure imposts, but there will be costs carried by organisations like our council. So to the author of the report who included that as a risk that needs to be mitigated, thank you. And I just want to say to all councillors, between now and 2032, we will see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of reports. And it's important for us to reflect on how the spectre of this Games will impact our organisation. And in the same way that we've had a discussion about Councillor Hamill wanting to pursue some planning changes in his division and the impact that that might have on competing priorities in the organisation, so the Olympic Games will possibly crowd out our ability to do bread and butter things that our community expects. So we just really need to be attuned to that. As Councillor Caldwell has advocated in a GB, I think some time ago, we need to be collecting those costs. And I think we should not be ashamed of the fact that we're demanding it, but we absolutely deserve a seat at that organising committee table. And Mr Mayor and Deputy Mayor Gates, personally, I just want to underscore that point, that while you advocate for a Gold Coast presence, I feel as though you've got the full support of this council, because there will be significant costs. And today we've got this innocuous report that deals with something that's not really to do with the Olympic Games, but foreshadows Olympic Games impacts. And if we're going to be carrying the cost, we damn well expect the rewards, and that will only be guaranteed through representation. Thanks.
Good point. Thank you, Councillor Vorster. Just a point, Mr CEO. In one of the agendas, I was fossicking looking for it, but in one of our agendas, I thought there may have been a change to the template because there was a mention of funding requirements. Mr McCabe, you're aware of that. Is that going to appear on all of our
agendas? That's my
agendas?
understanding. It may not have filtered right through to...
No, it doesn't seem so.
Work in progress, and I'll make sure that...
Okay, so there is an intention to have a new parameter as part of all of our reports which highlights any impact on funding associated with the 2032 Games. That proves I read my agendas, doesn't it? Okay, all right. So did anyone else wish to comment on Councillor Vorster's motion? If not, we'll take the vote on that item separately. All in favour? That is carried. Now, because I've been looking, I've lost my place. Any other items, councillors? Councillor Tozer, your declaration.
Madam Chair, I have a declaration to make in relation to item 7.2, which we dealt with at committee, but I'd love to do that again if you...
Thank you. Sure.
So pursuant to section 150 EQ3B and 150 EQ3C of the Local Government Act 2009, I provide notice that I have a declarable interest, conflict of interest in this matter, the nature and particulars of which are as follows. My wife owns and operates a film production company that would be eligible for funding under the Screen Access Program, and she is specifically mentioned in the reference report published by QUT that's provided as a supporting documentation. The name of the related party is Jude Kalman. She is my spouse. She runs a company that may be eligible for the program, although Jude and Little Drum Pictures, which is the name of her company, have no current work relating to grants pertaining to this program and have no intention of applying for grant funding. She works exclusively with charities. So the reasons I'd like to participate is I have some knowledge and interest in the program principally, and my contribution, I believe, will add value to debate and be in the public interest on the basis that no application is pending or will be submitted.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Castro, you'd like to move something?
Yes, Madam Chair. Yeah, I moved in committee what is actually on the screen, and happy to move that again, that Councillor Tozer may participate in the decision despite councillors declare conflict of interest because of the general nature of the report and the basis that no application is pending or will be submitted.
Thank you. And could we have a seconder? Councillor Pauline Young. All in favour? We'll take a division.
Councillor Gates, Councillor Tate, Councillor Hamill, Councillor Owen-Jones, Councillor Caldwell, Councillor Petty Young, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Barr-Lumsden, Councillor Castro, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Vorster, Councillor Pauline Young, Councillor McDonald and Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Tozer.
Madam Chair, I'm happy to move the item if that's okay.
Okay, seconder. Councillor Pauline Young.
Madam Chair, this program, the Screen Access Program, actually is filling a gap in our film industry community, and it's particularly targeted towards smaller Gold Coast-based companies that are providing services to bigger projects that are finding there's a phenomenal appetite for big projects to come into our city. But this project is actually, or this program is actually targeted towards smaller companies that provide services to those big companies or fill the gaps between the bigger production schedules. It's actually a really important gap that we've identified through a series of reports that the Council has previously considered, and also QUT has undertaken some significant research about. And what we are starting to see since the program started in August is a number of applications, almost a dozen now, and we're hoping to continue to grow that as the Gold Coast Film Festival comes to our city in May. And Screen Forever is currently in progress with lots of industry folk and production teams in town, not just to produce films, but to network and find where they can make the best out of our city when they come to locate their production teams right here. I commend the program to the council, but I think over the coming 12 months we will continue to see this project or this program be an incredible resource for our developing local talent, particularly with so many international production teams here as well. So.
That is carried. Any other items, councillors? Otherwise, back to you, Councillor Lacastra.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I move the remaining recommendations of the Economy, Tourism and Events Committee be adopted, those being, I believe, 7.1 and 7.3.
Seconded, Councillor Tozer. All in favour? That is carried. Thank you, Director. Okay, consideration of notices of motion. There are none. Questions on notice or answers to questions on notice? I haven't received any. Has the Mayor received any? No?
No.
No? Thanks, Mr Mayor. We still remember you there. Yeah. Presentation of petitions. I'll go to you, Councillor McDonald.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'd like to move that the petition requesting Council to reconsider the closure period of the Palm Beach Aquatic Centre redevelopment be received and referred to the appropriate committee for consideration and report to council.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor O'Neill. Go ahead, Councillor McDonald.
Madam Chair, there are around about 1,300 signatures citywide on this petition. So I'd just like to move that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All in favour of receiving the petition? That is carried. Against? Did I want to say against? So against? Thank you. It is carried still. Thanks. Sorry, I didn't give you the opportunity. We could take it again. We didn't see your hand, Mr. Mayor.
It was up there.
Good. Thank you. There's no items of general business, and we will actually take a 5-minute break before we. Well, actually, we'll move into closed session. Could I have a mover into closed? And the reason is because of staffing issues that we're going to move into closed. Moved Councillor Owen-Jones, seconded Councillor Caldwell. All in favour? We are now in closed session, streaming. Okay, councillors, we are back with the live stream activated. We have a motion before us. Mr Mayor, you would like to move this motion?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to move the motion as recommended. If it's all on the screen, I can't see from here. Otherwise, I'm happy to read it out.
Mr Mayor, it's all on the screen. I'm happy to second the motion. And did you want to speak to it, Mr Mayor?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
First up, there are some highlights in our organisation that our new CEO has picked up, and sometimes when you run an organisation, no matter how good it is, that is our position in finance as reported by independent Treasury, that we're in a strong and sound position in comparison to what it was. The outlook was negative 10 years ago. Even with that, an organisation of between 3,800 people to 4,000, having a fresh eye with a first-class CEO coming in is a wonderful opportunity to make our organisation even more efficient on behalf of the city. And councillors, you know that the main focus in making our operational matters more efficient, we can deliver better frontline service, but in all underlining, we can keep our council rates at or below CPI, and that's always been our determined motion in the past 6 years. And I am confident that what's been presented in front of us by our CEO is absolutely an opportunity not to be missed, and I would encourage you to get behind it. I'm looking forward to a unanimous decision there that sends a signal that our new CEO has the full support on every single word of this motion.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Any speakers against? If not, we'll take the vote. All in favour? Division is called. I'll call the division, if you like. Councillor Gates, Councillor Hamill, Councillor Owen-Jones, Councillor Caldwell, Councillor Young, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Baildon-Lumsden, Councillor Lacastra, Councillor Latosa, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Vorster, Councillor PC Young, Councillor McDonald, Councillor O'Neill, and of course the Mayor. Mr Mayor, thank you. That is everyone, and that is unanimous. Thank you. Now, councillors, I need to put to you whether you will accept a late item that is being recommended. Councillor Owen-Jones has proposed to move a late item, and you all know what that is. So I'd just like a show of hands, if I may, to indicate your support for the introduction of the late item, and that is carried. And I will now go to you, Councillor Owen-Jones, to speak to your item. Thank you very much. Seconded, Councillor Vorster.
Thank you. So I might wait for the words to come up before we go. So, because I gave the words to Luke, who has delegated it.
And I asked him to keep the motion on the screen that for the previous item. So.
We send Mr Mayor some takeaway Thai.
Have you got something for lunch, Mr Mayor?
Uber Eats Thai.
No, it looks like leftover chicken from last night.
I'm sure you can start speaking to it. You know what you're going to say.
Thank you. So, thank you. The chair has spoken. So the state of Queensland has a fund that is available for councils to apply to, which is about encouraging the recognition of outstanding women in the community. We had a motion of condolence this morning on the quite shocking news about Daphne passing away. So I thought that it would be appropriate if the council recommended that the Mayor write to the Minister for Women, Shannon Fenton, seeking support and funding for the commissioning of a statue to honour Ms Daphne Perry, MBE, AO. And I'm sure that the Mayor's office will be able to start that ball rolling, and there's more than one sporting facility on the Gold Coast where we could see that installed.
Thank you. And that's seconded by Councillor Vorster. And I'd have to say I had a brief discussion with the Mayor, and there's overwhelming support for a form of recognition for the great lady. So I'll take the vote on that. All in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you, and well done, Councillor Owen-Jones. Okay, there being no further business, thank you, Mr CEO, and we will close the meeting. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good to have you back. We'll close the meeting at 12:24.